Berlin, January 1945. The night hums with the distant thunder of artillery. In the corridors of the Reich Aviation Ministry, there is the smell of tobacco, sweat, and hopelessness. Secretaries rush up marble staircases, officers whisper in corners, but everyone is waiting for one man. A man surrounded by both legend and mockery. His name is Adolf Galland, Luftwaffe general and ace, credited with 104 victories, and now ready to challenge the entire war machine of the Reich. Wir haben keine Zeit mehr für Furcht. We have no more time for fear. Galland, January 1945. By this time, Germany was losing everything. From the east came the Red Army. From the west, the Anglo-American advance. In the air, total Allied dominance. Every day, thousands of Mustangs and Thunderbolts obliterated railways, fuel convoys, and airfields. The Luftwaffe was no longer a force, only a shadow of itself. In the skies remained boys, on the ground, empty fuel tanks, and exhausted mechanics. In December 1944, Galland was summoned to the Führer's headquarters, Wolfschanze, concrete, snow, and tension. Hitler demanded a new miracle, a new weapon of vengeance, and accused the Luftwaffe of cowardice. Galland stood and said, Wir kämpfen ohne Treibstoff, ohne Ersatzteile, und Sie erwarten Wunder. We fight without fuel, without spare parts, and you expect miracles. Hitler slammed his fist on the table. From that day, Galland became an outcast, but in the eyes of his pilots, a hero. Back in Berlin, Galland gathered the surviving commanders. On the wall, a map of Germany covered in red pins. He drew a line from Essen to Leipzig, the zone where we must strike first. Wenn wir sterben, dann in der Luft. If we die in the air. The plan was simple and insane: to form a strike squadron from the best surviving pilots, assemble the last Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, and launch a massive low-level attack on Allied airfields. A suicidal blow meant to shake the enemy. This would become Operation Bodenplatte, floorboard, as the Allies would call it later, the last great cry of the Luftwaffe. In January 1945, Galland toured the airfields. He saw shattered hangars, frozen runways, and boys with the faces of old men. Among them, a few veterans from Spain, France, Africa, those who still remembered flying for glory, not survival. Ihr seid die Letzten. Fliegt, als wäre das Himmel euer. You are the last. Fly as if the sky still belongs to you. The staff officers called him a madman. General Jeschonnek said, You want to sacrifice what's left of the Luftwaffe for a beautiful death. Galland replied, I want them to die as soldiers, not as targets on the ground. Secret orders went out across the remaining units. Pilots prepared for a dawn launch. Fuel was rationed down to the last liter. Officers personally signed for every drop of gasoline. The night before the attack, one mechanic wrote, We all knew we wouldn't return, but when Galland passed by, no one felt fear. He spoke quietly, like a man going with us. January 1st, 1945, 08:30. The airfields of Western Germany came alive. Hundreds of engines roared at once. The air thickened with exhaust and snow. The sun rose over the horizon, and the Luftwaffe began its last great assault. Ich sah den Himmel schwarz werden. I saw the sky turn black. The first minutes, success. Allied airfields in Belgium and Holland were caught off guard. Dozens of planes burned on the ground. But then the Mustangs and Thunderbolts took off. Within 2 hours, the battle turned into a massacre. The Germans lost over 300 aircraft, including many of their last experienced pilots. Galland watched through binoculars from his command post and whispered, Das war es. That's it. In Berlin, reports declared a great victory. Hitler applauded, but Galland said nothing. He knew the truth. The Luftwaffe hadn't died at the hands of the enemy, but from its own despair. We burned our own sky. A week later, the Allies achieved complete air supremacy. No German fighter could take off without being shot down within 10 minutes. No fuel, no pilots, and German skies now belonged to others. In February, Galland resigned. In his diary he wrote, "Ich war der letzte General des Himmels. I was the last general of the sky." On the snow-covered airfields remained the silhouettes of charred Focke-Wulfs. Above them, a dead sky, where no one awaited orders anymore. Befahl den Sturm, und der Sturm verschlang ihn selbst. He commanded the storm, and the storm consumed him. January 1st, 1945, 7:30 a.m. Snow settles on the runway at Altenburg Airfield. Fog hangs low over the forest. In the distance, the deep, steady growl of hundreds of engines warming in unison. Pilots stand in formation. Their faces are grey with exhaustion, their eyes calm, like those who know that today might be their last mission. General Adolf Galland steps out onto the tarmac. He gives no speech. He simply looks at his men and makes one short gesture with his hand. Fliegen. Fly. Across Germany, from Kassel to Düsseldorf, engines erupt into thunder. The ground trembles under thousands of horsepower. Mechanics wave their scarves. Alles klar. Young pilots cross themselves. Veterans take one last drag of a cigarette. They know. Operation Bodenplatte has begun. In the Luftwaffe command room, officers hunch over the map. 20 red arrows, each one an air wing. 900 aircraft in total. Their mission, to strike Allied airfields in Belgium and Holland, to destroy bombers and fighters before they can take off. It is meant to be a blow to the heart of Allied air power. No escorts, no fuel for the return flight. Only one objective: destroy, then vanish. Einschlag für die Ehre, a strike for honor. At 8i, JG-11 takes off first. Then JG-2, Richthofen, JG-26, JG-27, JG-54. The fuselages of Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs glint in the pale sun. Landing gear retracts, and they disappear into the low clouds. Es war, als würde der Himmel uns selbst verschlucken. It was as if the sky itself swallowed us. Pilot Hans Piper, JG-11. At 500 meters, everything is grey. The pilots fly by compass and instinct. The radio, silent. Only the hum of engines, and somewhere far ahead, distant flashes of flak. The group commander shouts into his mic, "Haltet die Formation. Ziel ist Eindhoven. Hold formation. Target is Eindhoven." 8:30. The fog begins to clear. Below them, Eindhoven airfield. On the ground, hundreds of Allied aircraft. Typhoons, tempests, mosquitoes. The pilots never had time to take off. JG-3 dives. Machine guns scream. Fuel tanks explode in chain reactions. Within minutes, the airfield is ablaze. Wir sahen die Erde brennen. Wir dachten, es ist Sieg. We saw the earth burning. We thought it was victory. But in that same moment, Mustangs appear. Only a dozen, but flying high, with the sun at their backs. Within 5 minutes, the Germans are trapped in hell. From 2,000 meters, P-51s swoop down. The first burst, 2 Messerschmitts ignite. Flames fall to the snow, and the white field glows red. Wir hatten keine Chance. Sie waren überall. We had no chance. They were everywhere. Radio channels collapse into chaos. Some pilots, disoriented, attack their own airfields. Others land on Allied runways, mistaking them for German bases. Fog, smoke, and broken communications turn the operation into a nightmare. Wir griffen uns selbst an. We attacked ourselves. On the ground, Allied soldiers stare up in disbelief. Are they crazy? Shouts a British gunner, ducking for cover. No, answers another. They're desperate. Dogfights replace bombing runs. The sky above Eindhoven and Gilze turns black with smoke and falling wreckage. At the command post in Cologne, officers try to keep contact. On the operations screen, a sea of red loss markers. Each one represents a man, a veteran, a final chance. Es war wie zusehen, wie dein Herz aufhört zu schlagen. It was like watching your own heart stop beating. Galland stands by the map, holding an ashtray in one hand, watching as flag after flag is removed. He realizes his mad plan is unfolding exactly as he feared. Ich habe ihnen den Tod gegeben, aber nicht den Sinn. I gave them death, but not meaning. Out of 900 aircraft, fewer than 300 return. Half of them are damaged, paint scorched, riddled with bullet holes. Mechanics remove their helmets in silence. There is no anger, no tears, only emptiness. Wir sahen keine Helden mehr, nur Asche. We saw no heroes anymore, only ashes. That evening, Galland gives one final order. Cease offensive flights. The Luftwaffe ceases to exist as an attacking force. He remains alone in the headquarters, staring at Göring's portrait on the wall. Der Wahnsinn war notwendig. Nur so kann man sehen, dass nichts mehr übrig ist. Madness was necessary. Only through it can one see that nothing is left. The airfields go dark. Wind blows across the runways, scattering papers, call signs, letters from home. Only the faint echo of distant explosions reminds them that the war is still not over. Der Sturm flog, und die Flügel brannten. The storm took flight, and the wings burned. ChatGPT's Gazal, Berlin, December 1944. The Reich Air Ministry still smells of coffee and ink, but the windows tremble with the rumble of distant Allied bombers. Around a long table sit weary officers. Folders marked Geheim lie beside maps of Europe. On those maps, red Allied arrows already touch the Rhine. And somewhere in the dim light, a voice breaks the silence. Wenn wir jetzt nichts tun, werden wir nie wieder fliegen. If we do nothing now, we will never fly again. It was the voice of General Adolf Galland. The plan for Operation Bodenplatte was not born in Göring's headquarters, but among desperate front-line officers. The first proposals came in November. Launch a massive surprise attack on Allied airfields in the Netherlands to reclaim, even for a short time, control of the skies. But the High Command dismissed it. Too risky, too late, too costly. Every aircraft was worth its weight in gold. This was not an operation, it was suicide, wrote Oberst Werner Schreiber in his memoirs. Galland, however, was not a man who waited for permission. He convened his own secret meeting. And there he said the line that would become the symbol of the entire operation. Wir sind tot, also sollen wir wenigstens laut sterben. We are dead already, so let us at least die loudly. Göring hesitated. He feared losing the last of his aircraft, but feared even more losing face before Hitler. Galland exploited that fear. He wrote a memorandum claiming that a surprise strike on Allied airfields could delay the enemy advance by at least 2 weeks. In that document, one word was underlined: Ehre, honor. That word bought Göring's approval. Hitler didn't need victory. He needed the illusion of defiance. By December 20th, the plan was approved. Targets were assigned: JG2 and JG26, airfields near Brussels and Ghent. JG27, JG53, JG54, Eindhoven, Gilze, Antwerp. Night fighter wings, Nachtjäger, would strike at dawn. Each group received fuel for only one flight. No reserves, no second chance. Fliegen oder fallen, fly or fall. But intelligence reports were 2 weeks old. The Allies constantly moved their bases, and the fog over Western Europe concealed them. Of 34 designated targets, only 18 actually existed at the time of attack. The rest were empty fields, ruined runways, or already captured by the Allies. Wir griffen Geister an. We attacked ghosts. The air in the operations room smelled of sweat, tobacco, and ink. No one shouted. No one argued. Everyone understood. This was the end. But everyone kept working. Someone counted ammunition. Someone signed orders. Someone smoked by the window, watching the snow fall. One officer later said, "Wir planten nicht den Sieg. Wir planten eine Legende." We weren't planning victory. We were planning a legend. Amid catastrophic losses on every front, the operation looked like an act of tragic heroism. German newspapers prepared their headlines. Unsere Adler schlagen zurück. Our eagles strike back. But the pilots themselves no longer believed in victory. They believed in honor. And that belief, ironically, became the cause of their destruction. Many commanders openly protested. Major Wilhelm Knauer wrote in his diary, "Ich glaube nicht an Götter oder Wunder, aber ich weiß, dass wir keine Chance haben. I don't believe in gods or miracles, but I know we have no chance." He refused to sign the plan. 2 days later, he was reassigned to the rear. December 31st, 1944. Across Germany, snow, frost, a full moon. The airfields lie silent. Only the sound of mechanics checking engines, and in the barracks, pilots writing letters home. If you're reading this, it means I didn't return. But know that I flew for the sky, not for the flag. Letter from Oberleutnant Klaus Stolz, found in 1947. At O2 How, Galland signed Directive Number 1145. It began with the words, "Morgen, im Morgengrauen, werden wir zeigen, dass der deutsche Himmel nicht schweigt." Tomorrow at dawn, we will show that the German sky is not yet silent. He signed it in black pencil. No seal, no date, as if he knew history would remember it anyway. At dawn on January 1st, the last eagles of the Luftwaffe rose into the sky. Their strategy, shock and chaos became the Luftwaffe's final act, a plan that destroyed not the enemy, but itself. 3 weeks later, British intelligence compiled its report, analysis of 277 German aircraft lost in a single day. The MI9 summary concluded, enemy air force effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. The operation that was meant to be an act of revenge became its own death sentence. The camera pans across an empty command room, a map with pins, cigarette butts, a cup of cold coffee. On the wall hangs the Luftwaffe motto, Adler fliegen nicht in Ketten. Eagles do not fly in chains. Now, those eagles would never fly again. Manchmal zerstört nicht der Feind dich, sondern der Mut, ihn zu besiegen. Sometimes it is not the enemy who destroys you, but the courage to try to defeat him. The Netherlands, January the 1st, 1945. A freezing morning. Milk grey fog over the fields. In the sky, hundreds of aircraft. The shadows of their wings stretch across snow-covered village roofs. For the locals, it looked like the Luftwaffe had returned. For the Allies, it was the sound of alarm. They came low, fast and silent at first. Then the sky simply exploded. British RAF mechanic, Brussels. The JG-26 squadron closes in on its target, Schiphol Airfield. Altitude, 400 meters. Engines running at minimum to avoid radar detection. Through the mist, pilots can see rows of Allied planes lined neatly along the runway. Commander Friedrich Becker gives the short order, Attacke für Deutschland. Seconds later, the sky erupts in fire. MG-151 cannons shred the wings of British Tempests. Exploding fuel tanks turn the snow into black slush. In 3 minutes, 24 aircraft are destroyed on the ground. Wir waren nicht Soldaten. Wir waren Feuer. We were not soldiers. We were fire. But the miracle doesn't last. The first British patrols take off. Out of the fog, P-51 Mustangs cut through the clouds, sunlight glinting off their wings. They come from above, owning the sky. The sky was theirs before we even saw them. Pilot, JG2. The Mustangs dive, firing single, precise bursts. Metal tears apart, fuel ignites, bodies fall with burning wreckage. The Luftwaffe's strength dissolves in minutes. The radio crackles with chaos. Call signs are mixed up. Pilots shout for leaders, but no one hears. Some cry for help, others say nothing. Wir sahen uns fallen, wie Schnee. We fell like snow. Over Brussels, the fiercest battle of the entire operation unfolds. JG-11 collides head-on with a patrol of thunderbolts. The Americans have the edge, faster, higher, heavier guns, but the Germans charge straight at them. I saw them coming straight at us, and I knew they weren't retreating. USAF pilot Richard F. Davis. The clash is lightning fast. At 1,000 meters, the sky flashes, fire, smoke, fragments of wings. In 10 minutes, over 40 planes are gone from both sides. On the ground in Belgium and Holland, mechanics and soldiers dive into trenches. Someone captures the chaos on a Bell and Howell camera, footage that will later become one of the most iconic reels of the war. You could feel the heat from the engines falling through the sky. British RAF technician. An hour into the operation, the Allies know everything. Radio intercepts, radar readings, and most of all, absolute air control. Hundreds of Mustangs and Tempests fill the sky from the Mars to the Igel. For every one of them, 10 of us rose. 3 hours after Operation Bodenplatte begins, less than a third of the Luftwaffe remains airborne. Nearly all experienced pilots are dead or captured. The Luftwaffe ceases to exist as a fighting force. At one airfield, an American pilot looks at the wreckage of Focke-Wulfs and mutters, "They were brave, but bravery isn't fuel." When the report reaches Berlin, everyone understands. It's over. Goering rages, Hitler screams, and Garland sits in silence. He simply takes a pen and writes, "Ich habe die letzte Luftwaffe gesehen. Sie war schön im Sterben." I have seen the last Luftwaffe. She was beautiful in death. Losses: 300 aircraft, 220 veteran pilots in a single day. This was not merely defeat. It was the end of Germany in the air. Allied reports summed it up bluntly. Enemy air force no longer capable of organized resistance. Historians would later call it the greatest act of heroic suicide in aviation history. But for those who flew that day, it was not suicide, it was farewell. Wir flogen nicht für Sieg, wir flogen für Erinnerung. We didn't fly for victory, we flew for memory. The camera rises over the ruins. Snow falls on twisted fuselages, on charred black crosses. Smoke still curls from a shattered engine. And above it all, silence. Der Himmel schloss sich, und öffnete sich nie mehr für uns. The sky closed, and it never opened for us again. The Netherlands, January 1st, 1945, 07:40. The engine of a Focke-Wulf 190 growls, devouring its last drops of fuel. In the cockpit sits Oberleutnant Johann Ritter, 24 years old, JG2. He isn't a hero. He's just another pilot who's been told, today, we take the sky back. Ich glaubte, wir fliegen gegen den Tod selbst. I believed we were flying against death itself. He checks the instruments. Oil temperature, 60 degrees. Pressure, steady. To his left, a mechanic raises his hand. Ready. Johann nods, tightens his harness, and looks upward. The sky stretches grey and endless, as if waiting to see who it will take first. The roar of his engine merges with the thunder of dozens more. He watches a pair of Messerschmitts lift off and vanish into the clouds. His hands tremble, not from fear, but from cold and adrenaline. Ich fühlte mich klein, zwischen Himmel und Hölle aus Metall. I felt small, caught between heaven and a hell of metal. The flight begins in silence. In his headset, a hoarse voice. Formation halten, keine Panik. Hold formation. No panic. Below, rooftops of villages glide by. The dark lines of the front stretch beyond them. And far ahead, plumes of Allied artillery smoke rise. It all feels unreal, as if he's flying inside someone else's dream. 10 minutes later, visual contact. Eindhoven airfield. Ritter spots the silver dots below. Planes, lined up perfectly on the ground. He dips the nose and opens fire. Bullets tear the earth apart. Fuel drums explode. Everything burns. He feels no triumph, only the steady, mechanical rhythm of his actions. Ich drückte den Abzug und ich fühlte nichts. I pressed the trigger and felt nothing. Suddenly, a shadow flashes to his left. He turns. A Mustang. The American dives from above. Johann yanks the stick, rolls hard, but feels bullets ripping through the fuselage. The cockpit shudders. Metal groans. Light flickers between the clouds. He smells burning oil and smoke. Ich roch meinen Tod. I smelled my death. The sky is chaos. The radio screams, static, shouts, fire, smoke. He sees his comrades shoot down a tempest, only to become a falling comet seconds later. Ritter dives, speed 700 km/h. The engine roars in protest. He levels out just as a Mustang flashes past. For a heartbeat, he sees the other pilot's eyes. The American smiles, then pulls away into the sun. The cooling system is gone. Oil streaks across the canopy. Visibility, 0. He slides the canopy open to breathe, and freezing wind lashes his face. Ich sah nichts, aber ich hörte das Lied der Propeller. Und das war das Lied des Endes. I saw nothing, but I heard the song of the propeller. And that was the song of the end. He pulls the stick. No response. The nose dips lower. For a moment, it seems he's gliding over an ocean, not the snow-covered fields of Holland. Vielleicht ist das Paradies weiß. Maybe paradise is white. He decides to jump, pulls the canopy lever. Jammed. Second tug. The glass cracks. He forces himself out. The wind tears away his gloves and helmet. The world flips. The roar fades. Only his heartbeat remains. Ich fiel, aber zum ersten Mal fühlte ich Frieden. I was falling, but for the first time, I felt peace. The parachute snaps open. A gust throws him down into a field. Impact, pain, then silence. He lies in the snow, listening to engines above, no longer German. Johann wakes hours later in a barn. Local farmers bandage his wounds. He doesn't understand why he's still alive. Ich wollte sterben im Himmel, aber der Himmel wollte mich nicht. I wanted to die in the sky, but the sky didn't want me. A day later, British soldiers find him. He doesn't resist. When an officer asks his name, he replies, Ich bin niemand, nur ein Pilot. I am no one, just a pilot. Years later, he will work as a mechanic in a small garage near Hamburg. Sometimes, when he hears an airplane overhead, he will look up and say softly, Ich erinnere mich an das Feuer und dass es schön war. I remember the fire and how beautiful it was. The camera moves closer to his face in the cockpit. Cracked glass, snow caught in the corners. His eyes close. Der Himmel war kein Ort für Helden mehr. The sky was no longer a place for heroes. Berlin, January 1945. Frost grips the city. The air reeks of burned fuel and ash. Berlin still breathes, but nothing in it has meaning anymore. Inside the Reich Air Ministry on Wilhelmstrasse, officers sit behind their desks, buried in reports. No one dares look anyone else in the eye. On the wall hangs a great map of Europe, crisscrossed by hundreds of red lines. Once they marked fronts. Now they trace the shape of defeat. Wir hatten keine Feinde mehr, nur Verantwortung. We had no more enemies, only responsibility. The first loss reports arrive on January 2nd. They come one after another. JG-26, 53 losses. JG-2, 48. JG-11, destroyed. Officers stare at the numbers, but no one says the word catastrophe. That word is already too small. Hermann Göring, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, receives the news at his estate in Karinhall. He refuses to believe it. He shouts at aides, blames Garland, orders the arrest of several squadron leaders. Wollte keine Wahrheit. Wollte nur Gehorsam. He didn't want truth. He wanted obedience. Witnesses would later recall Göring pacing the room with a cigar, repeating the same phrase over and over. Who gave them permission to fly without the Führer's order? 2 days later, Galland is summoned to Berlin. He enters Göring's office. No salute, no formality. Göring throws a folder onto the table. You killed my Luftwaffe. Galland answers calmly, Ich habe sie nur beerdigt. I only buried her. The words spread through the ministry like wildfire. They will become the epitaph of German air power. The headquarters descends into internal chaos. Some officers demand Galland's court-martial. Others insist on defending him. The last honest commander left. Colonel Paul Schmidt writes in his diary, Es war nicht mehr ein Heer, es war ein Theater. It was no longer an army. It was a theater. Everything collapses. Structure, discipline, morale. By January 10th, the final report is ready. Losses, 336 aircraft. Killed, 213 pilots. Result, 44 Allied aircraft destroyed. Official assessment, Operation hatte taktischen Erfolg, strategischen Zusammenbruch. The operation achieved tactical success, strategic collapse. Hitler demands the punishment of saboteurs. Göring blames intelligence. Intelligence blames the weather. In the end, the only culprit left is time itself. Es war zu spät, richtig zu sein. It was too late to be right. Mid-January. Pilots receive no fuel. Engineers dismantle broken engines to build one working machine out of 3. Officers falsify reports to avoid being court-martialed. Wir schrieben Sieg, wo es Asche gab. We wrote victories where there was only ash. Galland sits alone in his office, a room without windows. He knows his career is over, but he still writes notes, analyses of tactics, errors, losses. They are no longer military documents, but a chronicle of disappearance. Ich wollte den Himmel retten, aber ich sah nur Rauch. I wanted to save the sky, but all I saw was smoke. Many squadron leaders are arrested. Some vanish without trace. Some take their own lives. By February, JG-11 has just 8 flyable aircraft left. Wir waren keine Armee mehr. Wir waren Erinnerung. We were no longer an army. We were a memory. Allied intelligence in London and Washington reviews the state of the Luftwaffe and concludes, enemy leadership is fractured beyond repair. It means only one thing. There is no command structure left, only chaos and exhaustion. February 1945. Hitler orders the Luftwaffe to be reorganized. On paper, new divisions, new insignias, new promises. But on the airfields, silence. No planes, no fuel, no faith. Die Befehle kamen, aber niemand hob mehr ab. The orders came, but no one took off anymore. By the end of February, Galland is officially dismissed. He is forbidden to wear his uniform. He leaves the ministry, stops outside, and looks up at the sky. Clear for the first time in years. No vapor trails, no thunder. Ich dachte, das ist der Frieden, aber es war nur Leere. I thought it was peace, but it was only emptiness. The final image. An abandoned headquarters, scattered papers, portraits taken down. On the floor, a map of Europe, torn in two. Die Luftwaffe starb nicht im Himmel, sie starb in Büros. The Luftwaffe didn't die in the sky, it died in the offices. February 1945. Western Germany. Snow falls quietly over the wreckage of forgotten airfields. The Luftwaffe is gone. But around its ruins still move people, in grease-stained overalls, with tools in their hands, their eyes carrying no orders anymore, only memory. Wir hatten keine Flügel mehr, nur Hände. We had no wings left, only hands. At the abandoned base in Stade, silence reigns. Only the clang of metal and the echo of hammers break the air. 5 mechanics struggle to remove an engine from a shattered Focke-Wulf to mount it on another broken fuselage. From 3 dead aircraft, they try to build one that can still breathe. Senior technician Gerhard Böhme says quietly, Wir reparieren nicht für den Krieg. Wir reparieren für uns. We don't repair for the war, we repair for ourselves. Only a few remain on the airfields. Young pilots in winter jackets warm their hands over fuel drums, aging 10 years in a single month. One of them, Oberfeldwebel Hans Dieter, writes in his journal, Ich träume vom Fliegen, aber das Fliegen träumt nicht mehr von mir. I dream of flying, but flying no longer dreams of me. In Rechlin, engineers still attempt to test aircraft, but they have no fuel. They lift the machines onto wooden blocks and start the engines for 10 seconds, just to hear that they are still alive. Jeder Ton war wie ein Herzschlag eines sterbenden Riesen. Each sound was like the heartbeat of a dying giant. In the barracks, soldiers sort through the debris. Propellers, gauges, badges. Some turn them into lighters, others into small crosses. From the metal of war, they forge the charms of peace. Wir sammelten Trümmer, wie andere Blumen. We gathered wreckage, as others gather flowers. At night, the airfields seem alive again. Through the mist drift echoes of engines, ghostly murmurs of old sorties. The mechanics joke that the dead pilots are coming home. Vielleicht fliegen sie noch da oben. Wir sehen sie nur nicht mehr. Maybe they're still flying up there. We just can't see them anymore. Among those who remain grows a quiet guilt, not toward their country, but toward themselves. They realize that everything they repaired had flown not for peace, but for the illusion of command. Wir waren Mechaniker des Schweigens. We were mechanics of silence. Amid snow and oil, they write letters home, some to wives, others to the dead. Most begin or end with a single word, Verzeih, forgive. In March 1945, a mechanic manages to start the engine of an old Bf 109. It runs for 20 seconds before dying again. But everyone around applauds. For those few seconds, they hear something living, proof that even one spark still matters. Wir brauchten keine Siege mehr, nur Licht. We no longer needed victories. only light. Among these men, a new feeling is born, acceptance, not defeat, but understanding. They realize the sky was never an enemy. It simply no longer belonged to anyone. Das Himmel gehört nicht den Starken, es gehört den Stillen. The sky belongs not to the strong, but to the silent. The camera drifts over the snowy airfield. In the shadows, people repair what will never fly again. Wind scatters papers stamped with the word Befehl, order. In the background, a faint hum, the ghost of engines long gone. Die Waffen schwiegen, aber unsere Hände arbeiteten weiter. The weapons were silent, but our hands kept working. Spring, 1945. Berlin and Cologne are burning. City archives are destroyed, staff documents burned in courtyards. But some things survive. Letters, notebooks, torn diary pages. Later, Allied archivists will collect them under one title, Luftwaffe Correspondence Collection. And through these fragments, we can still hear the voices of those who would never again take to the skies. December 31st. We're standing in the hangar cleaning our weapons. I keep thinking that for New Year's Eve, I'd just like to sleep. If I don't come back tomorrow, tell my mother I flew beautifully. Letter from Lieutenant Klaus Stolz, JG2, Richthofen, found by Allied troops near Aachen, April 1945. After the sortie, we returned. Or rather, I returned. The mechanics looked at me as if I were a ghost. One of them said, "At least someone made it back for lunch." And we laughed. We always laughed. Otherwise, we would have gone insane. Diary of Unteroffizier Heinz Fuchs, February 1945. When I heard that Galland was dismissed, I knew it was over. Orders no longer came from the sky, but from the basement. Everyone talks about victory, but no one looks up anymore. Note by Oberstleutnant Wolfgang Röder, Luftwaffe Headquarters, Berlin. My dearest Anna, if you could have seen the dawn today. It was so pure, as if it didn't know we were flying to kill. If I don't return, look at the sky in the morning. That's where I'll be flying again. Letter found in the wreckage of a JG-11 aircraft near Breda. I repaired the 109 3 times. Each time I thought, why? It won't come back anyway. But if I stopped repairing, it would mean admitting it's over. And I couldn't admit that. Note by mechanic Gerhard Böhmer, Stade Airfield. The British gave me coffee. I hadn't tasted coffee since 1942. They asked, "Did you fly against us?" I said, "No, I flew against time." Interrogation report of pilot Hans Linke, Mons POW camp, March 1945. When I see boys in Hitler Youth uniforms, I want to shout, "Don't fly where we did," but I stay silent, because the sky feels like betrayal now. It isn't mine anymore. Letter of Oberfeldwebel R. Müller, 1946, written from British captivity. We built perfect machines, but no one told us that perfection is worthless without conscience. In Rechlin, there are no more test flights, only silence and crows on the runway. Entry from the Engineering Journal, Rechlin Test Center, February 1945. You can hear the bombs falling somewhere far away. They told us to evacuate, but I stayed. I wanted to hear the explosion of the air I once loved. Final note from an anonymous pilot's journal, March 1945, near Hanover. Now I ride the bus. When it accelerates, I close my eyes, and for a moment, I feel like I'm flying again. Only this flight doesn't kill. Letter from former pilot Friedrich Kallmann to his wife, 1953. We thought we ruled the sky, but the sky belongs to no one. I understood that too late. My hands still smell of gasoline, but I no longer build airplanes. I plant trees. From an interview with Josef Stolz, former Focke-Wulf engineer, 1956. Ich bin geflogen. I flew. Found on the wall of a destroyed hangar near Bremen. No signature, no date, just one word, a single memory that replaces everything else. The camera glides slowly across a wooden table. Scattered letters, ink stains, a pen, a page marked with dried blood. A whisper rises, a soft, many-voiced choir of defeat. Wir waren Stimmen des Windes. Jetzt sind wir nur Echo. We were the voices of the wind. Now we are only the echo. Germany, 1948. Munich. In a small house on the edge of the city lives a man who once commanded the skies over Europe. His name is known to all. Adolf Galland, Lieutenant General of the Luftwaffe. A former commander who once signed orders, now signs autographs on faded photographs of airplanes. Ich habe gelernt, dass Tapferkeit nichts bedeutet ohne Wahrheit. I have learned that bravery means nothing without truth. After the capitulation, Galland spent several months in a British camp near London. He was one of the few generals not tried for war crimes. The British treated him with respect. He had always been an officer, never a fanatic. In an interview in 1946, he said, Ich war Soldat, kein Politiker. I was a soldier, not a politician. But behind those words lingered a shadow. In private conversations, he confessed, My sin was that I believed in the sky too long, and not in people. An archived transcript from a British interrogation records. Why did you approve the Bodenplatte operation? Galland answered without hesitation. Because we had nothing left to lose. He paused, then added quietly, Ich wollte Ihnen eine letzte Chance geben, Ihre Ehre zu behalten. I wanted to give them one last chance to keep their honor. After the war, Galland often wrote about what he called the psychology of the end. He believed that defeat was not a moment, but a process. Man verliert zuerst den Glauben, dann die Kameraden, und am Ende das Schweigen. First you lose faith, then your comrades, and finally, silence. He recalled looking at a map in January 1945 and realizing that every arrow drawn on it was a lie. And yet, he still signed his name. Because if you don't sign, you're no longer a general. In 1951, Galland spoke at a gathering of former Luftwaffe pilots. In the photograph from that day, the hall is full, but no one is smiling. He stands and says, Ich habe euch geführt in den Sturm, und ich habe euch verloren. I led you into the storm, and I lost you. A pause. Then he adds softly, But you were the best men ever to look down from the sky. After that, he never spoke publicly again. In his private notes, Galland no longer wrote about strategy, but about fear. The sound of engines at night, the smell of kerosene, the trembling hands of young pilots as they pulled on their gloves. Ich erinnere mich an jedes Gesicht, nicht an jeden Sieg. I remember every face, not every victory. One of the most striking moments of his later life was his friendship with American pilots. In 1953, he met Colonel Gabe Howard, former commander of the 56th Fighter Group. In the photo, they sit together over coffee. Galland tells him, Ihr habt nicht gegen uns gekämpft. Ihr habt gegen den Krieg gekämpft. You didn't fight against us. You fought against the war itself. Howard replies, And you did too, only from the other side. In 1955, Galland published his memoirs, Die Ersten und die Letzten, the first and the last. It was more confession than history. He wrote of how the dream of speed, power, and flight became an instrument of death. Wir glaubten, die Zukunft zu bauen, aber wir bauten Asche. We thought we were building the future, but we built ash. A journalist once asked him, If you could return to that January of 1945, would you do things differently? He replied, Nein, because back then I believed, and belief is the last thing they can take from a man. Then, almost in a whisper, I just didn't know what I believed in. Galland lived until 1996. He flew private planes, attended historical air shows. Each time he sat in the cockpit, he wore his old Luftwaffe leather gloves. When asked why, he said, Damit meine Hände wissen, was sie getan haben, so that my hands remember what they have done. Historians still debate, was he a hero or a participant in tragedy? But in the archives, one line remains from a letter written shortly before his death. Ich habe keine Reue, nur Erinnerung. I have no remorse, only memory. The camera lingers on the old general by the window. On the sill, a model of a Messerschmitt. In the reflection, clouds drifting across the sky. War der letzte General des Himmels, und sein Himmel war leer. He was the last general of the sky, and his sky was empty. Spring 1949. 4 years have passed since the war ended. The fields of Germany are green again. On the ruins of old airfields, birch trees grow. The crosses in the cemeteries now stand in perfect rows. No flags, no ranks, no sides. Der Himmel hatte aufgehört zu töten. The sky had stopped killing. At the former airfield near Hanover, old mechanic Gerhard Böhme returns for the first time. He walks along cracked concrete slabs where Focke-Wulfs once stood. Now, only wind and birdsong. He stops, pulls an old wrench from his coat, lays it on the ground, and says softly, Jetzt bist du frei. Now you are free. Children play nearby, launching paper airplanes. Where hangars once stood, there is now a school field. A boy asks his teacher, Is it true there used to be pilots here? Yes, the teacher answers. Did they win? A pause. They taught us not to start. In the 1950s, the Allies erect memorial plaques on the sites of former airfields. One of them reads, Hier flogen Männer in den Tod. Jetzt fliegen Kinder in die Zukunft. Here men flew to their deaths. Now children fly into the future. Adolf Galland visits one of those former airfields. In a photograph, he stands in a long coat, staring at the grass growing through the concrete. He says nothing, but journalists later write, He smiled for the first time in years. In 1957, British pilot John Cross writes Galland a letter. We fought so that this sky would never burn again, and now, at last, it's clear. Galland replies, Das war unser gemeinsamer Sieg. That was our shared victory. Time moves on. The world changes. But on the sites of those old airfields, you can still find fragments, a piece of aluminum, a bullet, a broken gauge. Archaeologists of the 21st century call it memory metal. Every fragment of propeller is a note from a symphony the sky no longer wishes to play. In German schools, children study the war from books. For them, the Luftwaffe is not pride, but a lesson. In a museum in Bremen, a pilot's helmet rests in a glass case. Scratched into it are the words, Ich flieg heim. I'm flying home. The curators say visitors often stop there and simply stand in silence. Historians still debate. Should those who fought on the losing side be forgiven? But one truth endures. They were human, and their silence speaks louder than their orders. Manchmal ist das Schweigen das letzte Gebet. Sometimes silence is the last prayer. At the site of the old Rechlin airfield stands the Museum of Aviation. There, side by side, are a Messerschmitt, a Junkers, and a P-47. A small plaque reads, Diese Maschinen kämpften gegeneinander. Jetzt lehren sie zusammen. These machines once fought each other. Now they teach together. German and American flags hang side by side, and every visitor can see the war did not truly end in surrender, but in understanding. In archival footage from 1963, Galland is seen flying a small sport plane. The sun sets. He looks down at the earth below, and for a moment, the sound, the speed, the freedom return. He whispers to himself, "Es ist ruhig da oben." It's peaceful up there. The camera lifts over a green meadow where once there was only concrete. The wind ripples through the grass. In the distance, a child walks with a toy airplane in hand. Der Krieg war laut, der Frieden ist leise. The war was loud, peace is quiet. Final shot, a view from above. Clouds cast their shadows over the earth, and it seems as though the sky itself forgives those who once tried to claim it. Vielleicht fliegen sie noch immer, aber jetzt im Licht. Perhaps they still fly, but now in the light.